For more on these latest attacks claimed by ISIL, I'm joined by Adnan Zulfiqar. He's a fellow at both the University of Pennsylvania Law School and the Truman National Security Project and has expertise in Islamic law and theory and in jihad and social responsibility. Thanks so much for joining us. What do you think the landscape looks like now? Because just last week I was at a session here in D.C. Michael Fallon, the UK's defense secretary, painting a rosy picture of ISIL basically on its heels, losing ground, unable to pay its soldiers, hurting in recruitment of foreign fighters, and then we see what we see in terms of this major hit in this Kurdish town in the north of Syria.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in fact, those two things may be connected in some respects. ISIL does understand that it is on its heels in Iraq to some degree, and as a result, it does need to step up its more spectacular attacks. And so what we've seen in the past and are seeing now as well is when ISIL goes on its heels, then it does these spectacular attacks in an effort to recruit more people to its cause and potentially project power that it actually doesn't have. Now, this doesn't mean that they've been displaced in sort of, we don't need to be overconfident about this, but the two things may be related, especially after some of the losses that they faced in Iraq.
How do you combat that?
You know, I think the challenge here has got to be, there are multiple prongs to this. I think one of the biggest things that we have to address, which consistently we've ignored, is we need to approach the Syrian conflict as a whole with a level of urgency. You know, if we're frank about it, the Syrian government and the regime of Bashar al-Assad has been the single greatest contributor to militancy in current day. And so we have to figure out how to come up with a political solution there, how to rein in the Syrian regime, which has been going after its own population and essentially created an atmosphere of transnational jihad in its environment. So I think that's one of the ways that we have to come after it. The other approach is within our own countries, in the United States, in Europe, where some of these young men are being recruited over to ISIL. We have to come up with new and innovative strategies on how to address this problem. And part of that is going to involve a level of community engagement that maybe we haven't done before. And part of it is going to involve a changing of the narrative in many of these countries where you do see a commonality within some of these individuals, particularly with the attack in France and other places where they're coming from a sense of disenfranchisement and alienation and need to be encompassed within the narrative of these countries.
You know, it's interesting, this attack in Syria and the more recent attacks that you just mentioned are obscuring other stories. Forces fighting ISIL, capturing documents, data belonging to ISIL. And this is a story that's really not getting a lot of play, but I'm curious on your thoughts, how significant is this and what might be gleaned from getting this kind of intel?
Listen, I think there are actually a lot of victories out there, both happening in the region against ISIL and then happening within our respective countries in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere, where security forces and the police and law enforcement are doing a lot of things to prevent these type of attacks, and those don't get the attention they necessarily that they deserve. Now, the significance of some of these captures that we've seen of information in Iraq and other places are immensely useful. There's a recent report that the New America Foundation published, which talks about all jihad being local, where they look over the course of a year in 2013, look at essentially ISIS's recruitment logs, where they have extensive data on where their fighters are coming from and are actually filling out these entire forms of information that suggest and give you a sense of the pattern of people who are coming, the reasons for why they're coming, what their goals are, etc. And those can be immensely useful for us in trying to stem the tide of recruitment.
Adnan, thanks so much for joining us from Philadelphia. Appreciate it.